Mark Devine. Very big welcome to Roll with the Punches, sir.
Hey, Tiffanee. Thanks so much. Great to be here.
I'm like a kid in a candy shop today. A kid in a candy shop. How are you?
Oh, I'm fantastic. How are you?
I'm very good. I just told you about my internet dramas at my new house, and I was not being able to see people when I was podcasting with them because the screen was freezing, and I was like, I want to see Mark Devine. So all morning I've been doing all of the IT things and being really clever to get this thing rolling.
Well, it looks like you succeeded. Good job.
That's what we do, isn't it? That's what we do.
That's what we do. We just keep on rolling with the punches.
So by the end of this hour, I feel like I'll be even more equipped to keep succeeding.
Well, I hope so. And maybe we can help, others understand what success means too in the process. Yeah. True success, right?
I love that. Let's learn a little bit about you for the listeners who don't know a lot. Tell us a little bit about you. You were a Navy SEAL for a very long time.
Mm-hmm. I mean, that's one of the interesting things about my life, but it's probably the one that most people lock on, right? Because they think, oh my God, Navy SEALs. There's something kind of superhero-ish about the Navy SEALs, even though, Australia has some superb special operators and men and women, and so does most countries, not all. I've seen some real turds out there, but, but the Navy SEALs, there's unique panache about us. It's the way we're trained, it's the way we're taught to use our mind. There's something about when you meet a Navy SEAL, people just come away thinking, something different about that person, right? It's in their eyes, it's the way they carry themselves. And, it's not just that you wouldn't want to screw with them. It's just, there's something different. I've never really been able to completely put my finger on that, but, we could try to articulate what it is. So I was a SEAL for 20 years. About half of that time, Tiffanee, was real active duty, in the trenches doing stuff. The other half, I was a reserve officer, which I think was probably the best part-time job in the world. Can you imagine like being an Uber driver for special ops? You know what I mean? It's like,
yes.
Pick up the app and it's like, hey, look, there's an opportunity or a job for me to, parachute into Afghanistan and go hunt Osama bin Laden.
Oh, yeah, okay, that's amazing.
Boom. The uniform comes on and I've got my weapon and kit and I just go. And then 60 days later, I get to go home and, the pay just enters my paycheck and I take off my uniform and I go back to my other life. It was super cool. So I did that for about 10 years. Prior to that, this is interesting to people, prior to me joining, I didn't join the SEALs until I was 25. I went through SEAL training at 25 and turned 26 at BUDS, Basic Underwater Demolition SEAL training. I was in Manhattan in my first career, and I was at NYU Business School getting my MBA. And I became what in America we call a certified public accountant. It's probably like a certified financial analyst or chartered accountant or something for you guys.
Yeah.
So I became a CPA and an MBA, and I was working for PricewaterhouseCoopers, or Coopers, which was a predecessor company to Pricewaterhouse before they merged.
Yeah.
And so I was basically a bean counter. You know what I mean? I was getting into financial services. I wanted to be an investment banker or trader. That was kind of my path in. And
probably wouldn't have picked that.
No, I know most people wouldn't pick that. I'm probably the only CPA ever to become a Navy SEAL. And I tell people that one of those jobs I was a misfit in, and it wasn't being a Navy SEAL. It's certainly, I was a complete misfit as a bean counter. I had no business being there, but that's the story that I was brought up with. I kind of was brought up in a business family, and we had a business that had been around for over 100 years. This is like fourth generation. So it was always that we were going to go back into the family business, my siblings, especially the boys. We were 3 boys and 1 girl. Mm. And of course, all of them besides me are in the family business to this day. And so I kind of played out that story for as long as it lasted. Even getting the MBA and working for Coopers, that was all part of the story, because that was like great foundational experience that I could bring back to the business. And maybe I could make some money before, if I spent 10 years and really raked it in on Wall Street, I could then go back to the family business and already have some financial freedom. I mean, this is kind of like what was playing out in my naive little mind at the time. And then I ran into reality, and not in the way that a lot of people do. A lot of people run into their true reality, like the truth of who they really are, through a crisis. You know what I mean? You probably experienced that, or you heard that probably from a lot of your podcast guests. Something happens, boom, and it changes them. Lisa talked about that. Lisa Tamati, our friend. A lot of people find it through a crisis, either with themselves or a loved one, or through an utterly inspirational person or thing that happened, or just they're kind of wired a certain way and they just kind of like, it's rare, I think, but I see a lot of people who just kind of like are wired a certain way and find success because they're damn good at something, like a professional athlete or something like that. But for me, I met my true self on a meditation bench. I know. Look, you're like, what? How's that work out, Mark?
Okay, so far you're full of surprises.
Right. So when I moved to New York City, back up a little bit. When I grew up, I loved a couple things. I loved being outdoors and, hiking, running, and doing, a lot of people listening probably are the same. I loved being outside and in the woods and, being in nature. And I also loved athletics, and my sports were more endurance sports. And I recognized later a lot of that was because there was a shit ton of chaos in my family. There's a lot of anger, a lot of alcohol, just a lot of, turbulence. And so I was trying to get away from that.
Yeah, right.
And so I became a pretty dang good athlete, but, not like, I did make a run at the Olympics through rowing, but I didn't have the technical skills to do it. So that was kind of short-lived. But I was a really good endurance athlete, and I could suffer a lot of pain. And I think that's another thing when you grow up in a traumatic family and you deal with abuse, you kind of get good at dealing with pain. There's probably a lot of abused people in the SEALs because we're all damn good at dealing with pain. So
yep.
I'm making that claim. Someday maybe someone will prove it. But so when I got to New York City and suddenly I find myself in a business suit and tie, and everyone around me is kind of fat and pasty. And I looked at that and I said, no effing way is that going to be me, right? And so I kept up my regimen, or even doubled down on my regimen. I used to get up at 5 a.m. and go for a 6-mile run. And then at lunchtime, when everyone would go and have their kind of quote unquote martini lunch, I would go to the gym and bang on a high intensity workout, which wasn't even a thing back then. We're talking about 86.
Yeah, wow.
There's no CrossFit, there was no HIIT training. It was just like the gym with the Nautilus machines and some weights. And so I would fabricate my own high intensity work.
Yeah. What would tell me what that would look like?
Well, I would find 3 or 4 machines that were near each other that I knew that I could cobble together in a set of dumbbells, together a workout. And I would mark them just like a dog would mark, territory. And I'm
really? Just like that?
Yeah, no, not exactly like that, but you know what I'm saying. I would mentally and emotionally say, these are mine, do not touch it. And the way that worked is I would move through them so fast and nobody else would have a chance. And if anyone tried
you were just crazy.
They did. They thought I was a little nuts. And I would be literally 20 minutes and I'd just be blasted in sweat.
Yes.
And the normal big gym thing is to kind of walk around and wait for a machine to open and kind of read the newspaper on the treadmill. I was completely different. I was like, I have a limited amount of time and I got a lot of work to get done. So let's get busy. Boom. So I did that at lunchtime. And then I know I'm going off the charts on this story here, but that's okay because it'll make it fun. When I had to go to school at night, my school was at night during most of the year. It was 7:30 down at the World Trade Center. So Cooper's and Lybrand, it was part of a program. There were others in different companies that were part of this program. There's 70 of us. And it was like a cohort. And so we were all kind of able to get out of our jobs at 5. Well, for most people, not for people like you and me, but for most people, that meant they had time to go home and get something to eat and change their clothes and, maybe watch some TV and then go to school. For me, it gave me time to do some more training. I was like, hey, look at this. There's time to fit something in here, right? And I remember pondering, what am I going to do? What can I fit in here? I don't want to go for another run. And while I was pondering it one night, thinking what I'm going to do, I was probably going to do some body weight stuff. I came across a martial arts studio. I literally remember hearing the shouts above me on the second floor of this building on 23rd Street. I stopped and I look up and I see this flag. It's like a lotus flower and it says World Sado Karate Headquarters. I'm like, huh, that's interesting. And I just felt this pull, you know, and so I walk up in there and it's this beautiful dojo, you know, beautiful wood floor, 2,000 square feet. And there were probably like 100 students in it, just making this insane energy and noise. And in the middle of this melee was this short but powerful Japanese man named Tadashi Nakamura. And he was the founder of Sado Karate. And I literally signed up on the spot because I watched that guy. And, you know, I'll be honest with you, the same look that I see in Navy SEALs who are operating at the peak of their game, I saw in him. There was something really unique about him. He was simultaneously super light and playful while being deadly serious and deadly and powerful. Well, I started training in karate, and it just so happens about a month into it, I noticed on a Thursday night that I wanted to stick around and watch the black belt class. So I watched the black belt class, and I noticed after this class that about 10 students stayed, and they asked me to leave. And I said, well, what are they doing? They said, oh, this is the meditation class. This is the Zen meditation class. And I'm like, oh, interesting. And I said, can I do that? And they're like, no, it's usually black belts. So I asked Mr. Nakamura the next week, I said, I'd like to learn Zen meditation. Can I join that class? And he says, sure, of course. This is white belt. And so I started doing the Thursday meditation class, and I just absolutely loved it. And I stuck with it. I did it every single Thursday. And then I started training in the morning on my own for about a half hour. And then we would go, a small group of us would go with Mr. Nakamura up to the Zen Mountain Monastery in Woodstock, New York. That Woodstock where they had, you know, the big music festival back in the 70s. There's a monastery there called Zen Mountain Monastery. And we went for 4 or 5 days at a time. And we would meditate, and then we train karate. And then we meditate and we train karate, you know, 4 or 5 times a day.
Heaven.
Anyways, it's crazy what happens. So at first it was just like, I'm just trusting Nakamura. This is going to be good for me. But I just enjoyed the silence, you know, and the downtime, right? At first it was just like, wow, like a nervous system reset. I just felt really good. I couldn't really concentrate very long. You know, I was thinking the whole time. But over time, I was able to slowly concentrate for longer periods of time and kind of still the chatter. And then a really surprising thing happened, right? So if that was all that happened, I would have been like, cool, that's kind of neat. And I probably would have done anything with it. Or when I went in the SEALs, or I wouldn't have even been in the SEALs actually, because it just would have made me more healthy. And that's about the level that most people get to with meditation. But I kept sticking with it. And after about 2 to 2.5 years, I started to get, I guess, like intuitive information coming to me. And it was telling me, the information wasn't like a voice from God or anything like that. It was just like a sensation or a sense of something being off or something being on, or a sense of direction that I needed to head. And sometimes it came in the form of imagery or like words that I didn't hear, but I just kind of knew that was something, you know, that I was supposed to be thinking about. So the word warrior kept coming up, the sense that I was meant to be a warrior. And then that was kind of coupled with the sense that I was heading down the wrong path. It felt like a foreboding, like I was heading down the wrong path fast. And so I started to pay attention, and I started to journal about this stuff. And the more I journaled, the more I paid attention to these signals, the more clear that they became. And then synchronous stuff started to happen. So one day I kept, you know, I'm feeling into this idea of being a warrior, and also this idea that I'm going down the wrong path. And it's obviously like I'm putting two and two together. I'm like, And one day I'm walking home from work again, and I walked by this glass window, and there's a poster on the window from the inside out looking at me, and I look at it and it says, be someone special. And it's got like wickedly cool things happening on this poster. And you know what it was? It was Navy SEALs doing SEAL shit. Right. And I had never heard of the Navy SEALs, and it didn't say anything about the Navy SEALs in this poster, but I stopped my track and I stared at that for like 10 minutes and be like, holy shit, that's it. That's what warriors do. And that's what I need to do. It was so strong. I could go on and on and on about what happened after that and all that, but that changed the trajectory of my life, because check this out, Tiffanee, at 1999 or 89. So I started that whole 4-year craziness of MBA, CPA, my karate training in New York. 4 years into it is November 1989. And in that month, I received my MBA, my Master's of Business Administration in Finance. I received my CPA, which is a no joke, right? It took me 2.5 years to pass this silly examination, right? Which is just a nightmare. I received my first degree black belt in karate from Nakamura, which is a brutal test. And I left everything behind because I had joined the Navy to be a Navy SEAL officer. And I went to SEAL training 4 months later. I went to OCS, Officer Candidate School, and I went to SEAL training in March of the following year. I went through Navy SEAL training class 170 with 185 others. By the time we graduated, there were only 19 of us left. And I was the number one graduate.
Wow.
I was number one, honor man. And my team, my small team, we call a boat crew. There's six others than I, and I was their leader. My whole team and I graduated together that day. So 7 of the 19. And I 100% attribute it to the meditation. Like it changed me. It changed my brain. It changed how I perceived the world. It changed how I related to these other individuals who I cared about, so who became my team. It gave me incredible skills of concentration, also for recovery. It gave me the ability to maintain calm and non-reactionary, whenever the instructors created some shitstorm to confuse everybody and to make things chaotic. It gave me all these foundational skills that honestly, like even years later, I just was trying to figure out why, like, how does that work? What did it all mean? How do I teach those skills to others? And how do I continue to develop them? So that's kind of what led to my work that I started in 2004. While I was still in the Navy, I won a contract to mentor Navy SEAL trainees nationwide. And that was a government contract. They wouldn't let me do what I wanted to do. And it didn't matter because the contract got stolen from me anyways by a $1 billion company called Blackwater, which was a blessing, because then after licking my wounds a bit, I started SEALFIT. And with the intention of training special operators, US Navy SEALs plus allied countries. I had a ton of Australians come and join us in these methods that I had learned, but also I had to kind of like figure out what I had learned and how to teach it. And so that became a program I call Unbeatable Mind, which later on became another company. So I still have SEALFIT, but Unbeatable now is the bigger company, because I'm teaching these skills to organizations and to teams globally. And so I've got 400 certified coaches now, and we're really kind of roll out the Unbeatable Mind training so that people can really up-level themselves and take advantage of the power of meditation and breath work and visualization and all the different things that I've learned along the way. That was a very long way of giving you an introduction of who I am. Sorry about that.
I love it. I glanced down at the clock at 15 minutes, and because I'd already spent the last 5 minutes in my head thinking, an hour's not long enough. I want him back. I'm like, you're 15 minutes.
You probably
in,
came
mate,
up with like 30 different questions just for that. Right?
So many. I adore so much of what you shared there, and parts of it I resonated with. I'm definitely not a Navy SEAL, but looking at that poster was exactly the way I felt when I first laid my eyes on this corporate boxing challenge poster.
Nice.
And was just like, yeah, we're in. One thing that you said that I'd love to unpack, because it weirdly has kind of become my wheelhouse lately, is the childhood trauma thing and the impact on that and the mindsets and the repercussions. It's something that through this podcast, I've done a lot of self-discovery. A lot of my self-discovery came from the boxing ring, but then speaking out about it on here with all these different people and having such an interest in it, like I'm just peeling back layers like crazy. And you mentioned before about abuse as a child giving you the ability to withstand pain. So the Navy SEALs. And so I've been looking into, I had a couple of recent episodes, one with Dr. Bill Saunders. It's about, he's written a book similar to, you might have heard of the one that Oprah Winfrey and Bruce Perry have just written, called What Happened. It's about mental health not being so much biological or medical, but being a case of what happened to you as a child, childhood trauma. So I'm reading that. It is, for sure. Yeah. So I'm reading that.
I mean, it seems rather obvious to me, but
well, exactly. And
it's not so obvious to others, I guess. No.
Well, that's where my questions are all starting to stem from. And it's literally, it's flipped the way I view life and humans and thinking and development on its head. And it just keeps flipping. When I stepped in the boxing ring, I was blind to what I thought I was just doing. I was like, yeah. Oh, girls in the boxing ring, awesome, attention, whatever. But when I jumped in there and I had this pull to keep getting in there in this place of discomfort, a place that I was never sporty as a kid, but I kept going into this place where I was not coordinated and I was not the best and I had to work really hard, but I did work hard and I just kept going back. And then I questioned, I was like, what is this energetic pull? I don't understand. And then I queried it, and then I started thinking or remembering childhood stuff. And to the point where then I started researching it, like, this happened as a kid, what happens as an adult? And then I started realizing a lot of my traits as an adult and these strengths, they weren't strengths, they were coping mechanisms, or they were me focusing or reframing situations. Mm-hmm. So there was a lot about the boxing ring. And like you said, the ability to withstand pain, the ability to dissociate from any emotions in the moment when I was fighting, when that was happening. So I guess my question to you is, you probably don't know, but I'd like your ideas around, everyone seems to want to learn how to be more resilient, how to succeed, how to be a high performer. I've often asked the question to a range of people on the show, that because I've always thought, doesn't high performance in any area of someone's life, isn't anyone's high performance perhaps driven by a negative? Isn't it driven by a fear or a lack or an adversity, or because what makes somebody want to achieve so badly that they will do what it takes?
It can be, for sure. A lot of high performance is someone trying to seek meaning outside of themselves. You know, and I had this conversation with a good friend of mine, who's a Navy SEAL, who basically has done everything under the sun, and he almost died climbing Everest. You know, he had a pulmonary edema, and he's, you know, master freaking endurance athlete, you know, ultra runner, and he's even created adventure races, and, you know, he does everything. He's got his own reality TV show, you know, Don Mann is his name. He's a great guy. And I said, Don, you know, I said, what are you chasing? Like, what is it that moves you to always do the next hardest thing? I said, was there trauma in your childhood? And he just paused, and he's like, he had this like look on his face, and he said, yeah, there was a lot of trauma in my childhood. I said, oh, now it makes sense. We had a really interesting conversation, and I don't think anyone had pointed it out to him. He's like searching outside of himself to answer some issue that's, you know, unresolved inside. This is the crux of the human condition, Tiffanee, right? We get born and we have experiences. Now, if you want to get really, really kind of out there spiritually, we choose our parents so that we have those experiences, is my belief, right? Our spirit comes in knowing what we're in for, and it's for a reason. We choose it. Even the pain and suffering, we know it's coming, and we want it at a spiritual level because we know it's going to evolve us. They say in the therapeutic profession that the first 5 years of your life dictates the next 95. And when a child comes in, it's not able to think, right? Thinking doesn't even start happening until like you're 3 or 4. You're just a pure receptor, right? And your parents mirror everything. You just see it and you are that. So if your parents are anger, you are anger. If your parents are abuse, you are abuse. You know, If your parents are greedy, you just become exactly, you're just imprinting, you're sucking up all that energy. That's all you have. You have your spirit, and then you have this emotional, energetic body just sucking up information that completely 100% relies on first your mother, but then the unity of your parents. So if you have a broken home, if there's abuse, if they're screaming, even if you're just left alone too much. So you imagine, the effect that has. Now think about the way our world has evolved, our cultures and societies. Like what percentage of humanity has the 100% complete nurturing experience for their kids? It's extremely low, extremely low. So I maintain that there's very few humans that don't suffer trauma, macro and micro trauma. And it's because that's what it's about. Now you might choose as a spirit to just come in and have a coasting life, but that's fine. And so you're still going to have some trauma, but you may have a little bit, and it may be easy to resolve. And you might end up with like perfect physical attributes and go on to be an NFL star, and everything's glorious and you live happily ever after. And this wasn't a life with too many lessons for you. Fine. Good on you. You
Off your luck.
Yeah. The next time around may not be so easy for you. But most people have to unwind or unravel the stories, beliefs, and emotional patterns of their childhood if they want to find true success, which I define as peace of mind, contentment, and absolute love, care, compassion, and concern for all sentient beings. Right? That's success. So when you're on your deathbed and you look back and you are absolutely thrilled that you were the best human being that you could have possibly been, and that you made an impact on humanity and all those around you, and that you're completely ready to go, that's success. It has nothing to do with how much money you have and how many freaking companies you own. It is zero to do that. You can't take it with you, but a lot of people die trying, Unfortunately, especially in the West and probably most of the world, most people don't really have the time because they're super distracted and overcommitted, just trying to make a living and get by. They don't have the time to do the emotional development. They don't have the modeling for it. It's not modeled in our society as something that's good to do. It is starting to be now. This is why this is a really important period of our history. Like humanity is transforming because you and I are talking to hundreds of thousands or millions of people, Oprah and everybody. It's like, okay, we have to do the emotional work if you want to overcome the limitations that hold us back and stop living a life of constantly grasping for something outside of us. Yeah. And here's why it's important and even why it's almost impossible for a lot of people to meditate is because they're too agitated. They're filled with too much stress because they're not living in alignment with their, spirit's calling. And they're playing out all these stories and dramas based upon the trauma. And like you said, appropriately, because you have these traumatic experiences, then you contextualize them through the child's mind, which is not skilled at understanding. And so then these stories get embedded into your subconscious mind and the emotional energy gets stunted. It either gets repressed or projected in an unhealthy way. And so it holds you back. Or, it causes you to do things that you don't understand that could be ultimately not either what's right for you or damaging in the long run. Yeah. Right. So, and we can't really align with our calling and really fulfill our essence, our reason for being on this planet, unless we do the emotional work, because we're kind of hiding our true self from ourselves. I think it's just incredibly important. In my program at Unbeatable Mind, we make it the center post. So our program is Unbeatable Mind is a program of integration training. And so what I've learned is that, we like to think of ourselves as a body here and a mind there and a spirit over there. And even, mind, body, spirit is a thing as if they're three different things, but it's not that way. It's one thing. We just, because of the way our brains work, we have to name things and separate them in order to understand them. And then we study them and then we reduce them into smaller and smaller things. That's the way science, works. So what we do is we say, okay, given that we know that, let's start taking these aspects of ourselves and reintegrating them by training them together. So we train we call them the 5 mountains: physical, mental, emotional, intuition, and spirit. I use the term kokoro for spirit because, some people get scared that you're talking about religion and stuff. And for kokoro is a warrior term out of the Japanese tradition that means merging heart and mind into action. It's like embodied wholeness, So what we do is we train people how to train these 5 things. And then we ask them and we work with them to train them together every day in a training plan, just like you'd have a training plan for boxing. So this is a training plan for integration so you can live a whole life. So every workout, for instance, becomes a 5 mountain workout. There's a physical aspect, there's the mental aspect, there's the emotional aspect, there's an intuitive aspect, and then there's kind of like the purpose/spiritual aspect, or the service aspect even. And wow, what a game changer this is, right? So, instead of working out for a beach body, you're working out to become the best person, the best version of yourself possible, right? Every morning when you wake up, you look at your day and you say, okay, what am I going to do right now in the next hour to prepare to win this day so that I can become the best version of myself, so I can serve in a way that I'm supposed to serve today, make a bigger impact. And it's profoundly transformative. But the part that and this brings me back to your question, the part that all my clients and students get stuck on is the emotional mountain, because it's just hard work. And there's no there, right? You just keep peeling the onion, until you go deeper and deeper and get more and more understanding.
Yeah.
And then eventually you recognize that you were fine all along, and that all of this stuff was there to serve you. All the stuff that we think that we're a victim of was actually there to serve you. And it's a great blessing. Like, I went through a long period where I felt like, my parents did this to me, and look at who I could have been had they not done that to me. And that was flawed thinking. So I've gone through many years where I was trying to fix myself until finally I realized I was never broken, that all those things that happened were a blessing. And I just had to understand why they were a blessing and to see the power and strength that they gave me. For instance, making me a badass Navy SEAL, right? What a great experience. And so I honor my father for making me tough as nails, as opposed to playing the victim for him abusing me. You know what I mean?
I love that. I want to say thanks for the moment you started to answer that question, and the moment you said we actually choose our parents. And that gave me goosebumps, and it has again right now. But what I felt recently, so I've always said I've always been happy and driven and resilient and all that rubbish, and then jumped in the boxing ring and then found out that stuff. And on a recent podcast with Fritzi Horstman, she was in the Wisdom of Trauma film, and we were talking about the ACE score, the Adverse Childhood Experience score. And I said, I only got a 4. And she said, that's high. And I thought that was low. She goes, that's high.
Yeah, I think it was only like 10, right?
Yeah. So for it, and I was like, I only got a 4, so it wasn't so bad, because I still go, I had a good childhood. There was just some stuff. And then, and I never, ever, I very quickly aligned the positives with what I went through, and was, I never went through a point of being angry about it. Even through a point of going, okay, so my childhood was less than perfect, but there's no blame. I never blamed my parents for maybe not giving me everything that other people got. I know they did their best, and I love them for it. But last night I was in bed reading Bill Saunders' book and researching, well, how many people have this adverse childhood experience level of 4? And it was like 12%. And so then I was feeling kind of a little bit angry that 12%. So it's not, I think like yourself, everyone's got trauma and things to work on. Everyone's got shit, and they just either don't know it yet or aren't looking at it. But then I got a little bit kind of angry. But as soon as you said that, I just felt like this sense of purpose. And I actually wrote down, what am I going to do with this? It gave me a purpose, because I was like, well, I'm strong. And now I kind of know, like, that I don't need to, like, I immediately lost that anger. Like, that was.
Yeah. You don't need to be filled with regret and resentment. You can actually just let all that go and move directly to acceptance and forgiveness. And it'll save a lot of time.
Yeah.
It'll save a lot of heartache too. And you know what? I don't know where he's getting that number. I think they're probably trying to extrapolate based upon, populations that have taken the ACE, but how many people have actually taken the ACE in this country? Not many.
Yeah.
Maybe thousands. And my experience is, even with my own clients, they're not very good at self-assessing.
Yeah.
And a lot of them aren't even aware of the trauma because, it's suppressed. Like you don't want to remember the really bad stuff, and the other stuff you kind of discount.
Yeah.
And we're talking, we grew up with
normal,
a whole
right?
generation that said, get over it. Or, just growing up in a Judeo-Christian society is traumatizing, right? Seriously, people may laugh or even judge me for saying that, but it is, right? There's a lot of things that are traumatizing about the view toward women, the view towards sexuality, right? Even just separating you from your own experience of God, because by standing between you and God is traumatizing for a spirit that comes into this world. Is like, God, where's God? And you're like, oh, well, you have to go down to that building over there with the steeple on it to find.
So true. It's so true.
I'm just saying that people, they don't really understand really what trauma is and the extent of it, and how it can show up to really damage a young child. And so I think there'd be a lot more wisdom about that in the future. And again, it doesn't make anybody wrong. I'm not trying to make the church wrong or anybody wrong. It's just the way culture kind of evolved. But I think we're heading into an age where there's going to be a lot more wisdom and a lot more awareness, and the vibrational level of consciousness is accelerating. And people aren't going to stand for ignorance anymore, and people aren't going to stand for systems or people or companies or even countries that hold growth back, hold people back from becoming the awesome humans that they are. Right. And just think about it, like it's a huge industry to keep people sick. It's a huge industry to keep people ignorant and in fear.
Yeah.
And that's just got to stop. This is why you and I do what we do. I think it's one of the reasons, right?
Yeah. Yeah. It intrigues me. And I look at how, what are your thoughts on like fate and free will? Like, what do you think about free will? And
I think that we have free will because we've chosen this physical experience. It's not like God is not here. God, we are an aspect of God, but we've just chosen, to have this physical experience, but it's not the whole of us. It's like we're having a dream in our spirit world that is experienced as 100-year physical life. And in that dream, we get to do whatever the hell we want.
Yeah.
We have free will, and there's no judgment whatsoever from whatever you want to call God or the spirit that runs through all this. None whatsoever. None.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because, basically you're an aspect of God. You chose this. So you get to play the video game in any way you want. And in fact, when you develop the mental structure and the mental powers that we talk about and that we're all trying to gain, or that what I teach in Unbeatable Mind, you can create whatever you want. You can literally redesign the video game like Neo in the Matrix, because it's your game. Yeah. We all live this game from our minds.
Yep.
Everything we see, this conversation we're having, I'm creating it in my mind, you're creating it in your mind. We can take it in any direction that we want, and we can contextualize it any way we want.
Yeah.
Now, there's co-creation going on here, and everyone co-creates, and sometimes we bump into each other like little billiard balls, and it can get a little bit messy. But I fully believe in the free will of the material egoic existence. Now, full stop. I also believe in karma, and that as a spirit, we come in bringing along certain energies that we're going to play out in this lifetime. They're going to play out.
Yeah.
And the free will part will determine how and when you get the lesson, because you're going to be presented with the opportunity to clear up that karma pretty early in your life, when you're a fully capable adult, probably, and even earlier. Sometimes it happens really, it could be anything, right? It could be earlier as a child, having childhood cancer. That could be you're really not much that child's going to do about it. But that was part of the karma. But it might show up later. And if you're a reasoning person and you deny the lesson, you don't learn the lesson, then it's just going to come back. And so the way free will and karma work together is you can miss the lesson. You can avoid it, right? Maybe you're too lazy, you're too distracted, you haven't slowed down enough, you're not paying attention, or you've bought into somebody else's belief system and you ignore whatever. It could be 100 different things, reasons why you just, you should be doing something, but you don't do it.
Mm.
And then it shows up again. You should be doing it or learning a lesson or stop doing something, like, maybe you're an addict and your karmic life, story is to overcome addiction this life, but you just don't have the strength to do it. And so you die an addict. And guess what? Next time around, you're going to have the same freaking lesson.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So I think that's kind of like how fate and free will kind of dance with each other, because fate is related to the spiritual and free will is related to the material, physical.
Yeah. I love that. I love it. I always think to myself, I think if anyone is to think that free will doesn't exist, a little bit of our, I guess our will itself, our control and our belief is going to die along with it, because if we think that we don't have control.
Yeah, we're not puppets on a string, for sure.
Yeah.
We have control over this, we have control over certain aspects, basically, of how we think, what to believe, and then how to act in the world. We have total control over that. What we don't have control over is, the experiences that are imprinted on us in early childhood up to basically we become autonomous adults, as well as the karmic imprints that we bring into the world. We don't have control over that. That's fate. And we have to deal with that. We have to learn from it and understand it.
How much of the unbeatable mind works on, is there a consciousness component? Because the thing I find challenging is people want change and they come. And sometimes when we learn things or when people learn things, this label that they learn about themselves becomes an anchor. I got diagnosed with this, or this happened to me. And then they go from here to here, and then they're stuck, and then they're a little bit negative, and they're just in a loop. How do we, it seems to me like someone needs to be ready for that consciousness. Like I always say that there would have been a time that pre-stepping into the boxing ring, if someone had come to me and said, you've actually had childhood trauma, you're actually not independent and strong and all of this stuff, you're petrified of vulnerability, you're running away from everything, and you're staying super busy so that you can never be quiet enough to check in and feel emotion, I would have been like, fuck you. You can go and get stuck. I know exactly who I am and I'm amazing, and look at the Tiff show. But, so it was 29 years old when that smacked me in the face, and I went, oh.
That's awesome. Well, I tell you, everybody's at a different place, right? Everyone has different trauma, different life experiences, a different level of mind, different karma. Their awareness and consciousness is different, and these developmental stages have been mapped by multiple traditions. Transpersonal psychology, integral theory, spiral dynamics, and even Buddhist psychology and more. And so that's why it's like working in teams and families are so messy. Even with families, you think that, everyone in the family is going to be the same. And of course, we know that's ridiculously not true. Like everybody's very different. You're like, how did it, I don't even understand. I look at my siblings, and God bless them, I love them. But I'm like, I don't know how we came from the same, blood, basically.
Yeah.
It's because we all have these different level of consciousness, different level of awarenesses, different perspective, different stories. So from Unbeatable Mind standpoint, we recognize that, our story is our story, your story is your story. We're going to work together to kind of find mutual understanding through perspective taking, but I'm not going to project my shit on you. So that's part of the developmental stuff. And I'm not going to let you project on me. So let's just start with kind of like introspection 101. First, we've got to get our body healthy. And so we take care of the basic fundamentals like you do with your clients of, let's get into a good exercise regimen. Let's get our nutrition dialed in. Let's get our sleep dialed in. And let's begin a breathing practice, right, to start to balance our physiology. We call that box breathing. And let's spend some more time in nature and whatnot. And then we start to teach them how to train like this every day so that we're covering all those 5 mountains that we talked about. Okay, that's Mark 1 motto. And, we get that dialed in. And we work together in teams. So we put everyone together in a team that we call a boat crew. So they've got accountability, they've got a swim buddy, someone holding them accountable, and they've got a coach who's helping them. And this is a minimum year-long process. Excellence is not mass produced overnight, right? It takes time.
Don't tell everyone that, they're going to tune out.
Right. So that's really, we start people on the physical mountain because you have to start there. And also they understand it, and you can benchmark things easier, and they see results really fast and they get really motivated. But it doesn't mean we don't start the mental training and the emotional training until later, because the box breathing, the breathing practice is a Trojan horse. It has a physical, a mental, an emotional, and a spiritual quality to it.
Ooh.
And so the physical quality of the box breathing practice, or any breathing practice for that matter, is to bleed off stress and to balance the physiology, which makes you feel better and it calms your brain down. The mental part of the box breathing practice, once your body and brain start to calm down, then you can use it as to develop concentration, which is like Zen boot camp that I did. So we use the practice to deepen our powers of concentration and ability to control our attention. So now our mind is getting stronger. And then as your mind gets stronger, we have a practice we call connecting, 2 practices. One is called mindful awareness, which is our version of mindfulness, but it's not mindfulness. It's basically creating a metacognitive partition in your brain where you're thinking about your thinking. And you're looking at the quality of your thinking. And you do this in your practice, and then over time it becomes like you do it all the time, where you're like setting up shop over here in your right contextual mind, looking at the processing of your left thinking, analyzing brain, and you're asking yourself, is that a positive thing to think? Is that thought serving me? Is it on target, or am I distracting myself? Is that thought stream going to lead me toward, my mission in life, toward completion, etc. And so you're constantly analyzing and asking, what's the quality of my thinking right now? And this is really powerful because you start to really see where the crap comes in. You start to see the negative reactionary conditioning. You start to see the fear loops, all the things that hold you back, which most people are completely merged with, and this is profound already. What we're talking about, Tiffanee, is profound because most people don't separate from their thoughts at all. They just are their thoughts.
I am my thinking. Yeah.
I am my thinking. And so we immediately get people to separate from that, both from an idea standpoint, but also from a very real standpoint. We train it. And then the other thing that we do is we train them to connect to what we call the witness, which is your experience of mind beyond the brain, And so that happens automatically when you do these practices with the breath. The spiritual aspect is the breath. When you are aware of the breath and you continue to be aware of the breath and you stay with the breath through a meditative practice, it slowly brings your awareness inward, right? And so you go from all outward to partly outward to all inward, where you're aware of the outer, but now your sphere of attention is inward. And that's when you begin to activate the other brains that we have. So you activate your heart brain and your gut brain and your body brain all start to come online. And now you experience the body as a mind. We call that whole mind thinking.
Oh.
So when you begin to experience your body or the mind, then there's this sense of that my mind extends beyond my body, which it does. And the mind is actually independent of the body. And so the part of you that recognizes yourself as mind independent of the body, but then can also be thinking about your thinking. It's like the witness witnessing the witness witnessing the thinker. That is what we call the witness. That's basically your field of awareness itself. And so it's called the experience of that in the spiritual traditions is called an awakening. And a stabilized awakened state is to be permanently identified and permanently in that state of witnessing. And then you become so incredibly grounded that you're like, it's described as you're like the mountain, and cloud, thoughts and emotions are like the clouds just passing by. And so you can either choose to engage or you just let them go. And this is where you have tremendous acceleration of emotional healing, because you get great perspective. You get literally the spiritual perspective on the trauma and on the emotions, and you can see these things coming up as they come up, and you can decide whether they're useful or not. And you can let the energy kind of flow. And as you know, where energy flows, emotion goes, right? And a lot of times the reason these traumatic emotions stay with us is because we keep them stuck, because we don't want to feel them. And so we don't let the energy flow. It never has a chance to get out of our body. At any rate, all of that happens kind of naturally through a long period of breath awareness and mindfulness and, dropping, like non-dual kind of meditation. But it helps to have a guide, and it helps to have some languaging and some like trail markers so you can get back to places. And that's what we do in Unbeatable Mind. And so it's a process of really integrating to experience this whole mind, living from this whole mind. And that whole process we call one of self-mastery. It's like basically becoming you, the whole you, and living from that. And then the second part of that is as you do that, you activate your sense of purpose, like I did on the Zen Meditation bench back in New York. You activate your purpose. If you're not clear about your purpose, it becomes very clear to you, because it's your inner guidance system says, Tiffanee, you're meant to do this and not that. And you're quiet enough and now skilled enough to listen to that. And so it activates your purpose or your calling, or what the yogis call your dharma. And you feel this sense of absolute criticality to align with that. Like nothing becomes more important besides, of course, yourself, your health and your loved one's health. Everything else is like, how do I align with my purpose so that I can go out and fulfill that? And your purpose might be just to go out and garden, you know what I mean? Or it might be like our purpose is to train 100 million people in this path we call Unbeatable Mind. That's mine. And I feel like an intense drive. The 100 million isn't so important. It's the intense drive to teach this information as best I can, and to live it as a living example of it, And so there's these two sides to it. One is to master yourself, and the other side is to serve powerfully. And it almost mirrors the whole idea of yin and yang, and that yin yang symbol, right? The yang is action, that's service, that's getting things done in the world. And yin is receptivity and wholeness and beingness, doing and being. And we want to live right on the bleeding edge between the yin and yang, right? Every moment you're in service, but you're also in yourself, clear on why you're doing what you're doing. Isn't that cool?
I think that you might be my favorite human in the world.
I love it.
You are so
That's so
different to what I expected. I guess you just think Navy SEAL, this is awesome, resilience, the hard stuff, mindset, focus, but this whole yin side is so, like, I reckon I've had goosebumps 5 different times.
We need that, by the way. We need both. Otherwise you're half human, right? Whether you're a female who's missing the yang or a male missing the yin, you're half person. Many of my teammates are incomplete in that regard, and they're great people. They don't understand, but they're also struggling because of it. They're not taught, or they haven't allowed themselves to embrace the yin energy. you know, and it's probably because it's been called feminine energy, but it's not. It's just part of being human.
Yeah,
you know?
I think the yin energy is the energy I'm failing with as well.
Yeah, and exactly. There's a lot of women who are taught that that's not acceptable. To succeed, you got to really kind of lean into that yang and the masculine energy, and then it hurts them as well.
Yeah.
So you need to be, in order to be whole, we need to be balanced. So there's no perfect balance. We're always kind of like, we're moving between the two constantly. But our sense of intuition says, oh, move back over here a little bit more. Oh, I need to move back over here a little bit more. And then as we get more skilled, the range of movement between the yin and yang become very, very small instead of these wild swings. And so we find balance by being a little bit out of balance and rebalancing, a little bit out of balance, rebalancing until it's like a tiny little oscillating line. And then at the mastery level, like the Tai Chi master, who can warp time and space like Yoda.
Yeah.
It's just riding that razor's edge. There's no separation between the yin and the yang, the masculine and the feminine, the dark and the light.
Yeah. It's so,
and that's a cool thing. I part of also my life path is to try to find that through my martial arts. And it's, because you don't have to do that. That's just one expression, is to use the human body in a way that is kind of uncommon. You know what I mean? Like the advanced yogis and martial arts can do things that normal human can't do. And we just think it's a weird skill that they have. And it's not. It's something they train, Like I train Aikido now, and Ueshiba, the founder of Aikido, used to challenge people to shoot him. And he would have like 3 people line up to shoot him, and they would pull the triggers. And before the bullet even got down range, the guy who pulled the trigger first was on the ground, and Ueshiba was behind him. It's extraordinary. Yeah.
Hello.
He just showed up. Yeah.
Perfect timing.
He came to correct my story.
What sort of job have you got?
The correlator to that story, which is really cool, is that they went and found, or someone had heard about this Russian guy who was he was like a master hunter. He just grew up in the woods in the Tigra, and he would just, like he would sense a bird taking off, and he would just, he'd just nail it. And so they brought him to Ueshiba, and Ueshiba was sitting down. He would sit down, like while these people are pulling the triggers, and then he'd be gone. He'd be behind them, and nobody could see him go. Like slow motion pictures saw him shuffling along like this, but the guy somehow could move like the wind, like that. Yeah. Somehow he was like warping the time experience of everyone there. But anyways, when they brought this guy, and the guy said, okay, you want me to shoot this little Japanese guy? Like, why? And they explained it to him. He's like, oh, okay. So he prepared his weapon, and Ueshiba goes, no, stop. This guy will kill me. Like this man had his level of skill in a different domain.
Whoa.
And so he said no. But anyways, I went off on a little tangent there. I just think that stuff is wickedly cool. I love stories of yogis who can walk on water and live forever, or, like do crazy shit.
Yeah.
And I think that we have such a limited understanding of what it means to be human, both physically as well as, mentally and spiritually. It's my passion and kind of life purpose to like, peel the onion a little bit and help people understand that they have the potential. They have unbelievable potential, unlimited almost. So why not, right? Like, what the heck? It's got to be more to life than just going to work and putting money in the bank,
True. Very true. Well, I could keep you here for another 8 hours, I reckon, but I will.
We could talk all day.
I will gracefully thank you so much. Probably more so for me, but for everyone else listening, what's the structure of Unbeatable Mind, and how do they get involved? They being we or me.
Oh, I'd love to have you. It'd be fun to talk about that. Well, most people like to try before they buy. And so we have a 30-day challenge type program, which is like 15 minutes a day, me giving you a video and asking you to journal. And so I introduce box breathing, I introduce micro goals, I introduce visualization, some of our, basic techniques in that. And that's free unless you want to keep it at the end. Then we charge you $99. So I want as many people to do this as possible. That's found at unbeatablemind.com/challenge. It's a really, really good program. I've heard incredible feedback on it.